Okay, you guys, I'm going to show you guys E-wrap cast on, which is the first cast on we learn. It's really simple, it's really straightforward. That doesn't mean that you're going to get it right off the bat. There's a few little tricks, so as always, be kind to yourself in terms of expectations. So the first thing is first, my knitting machine is all threaded up, ready to go. And now I'm going to take my needles, which are back here in A position, which is also a non-working position, and I'm going to just push them forward to D position, and that's all the way forward until they click into place right here. You can use a needle pusher bar, you can just use your fingers. When you're really comfortable, you can just put a whole bunch of them at a time. You can see though I've got my 0 is in the center here, and I'm going to work 10 needles to the right of 0, 10 needles to the left of 0. It's just a nice way to work to keep things even for down the road. It's a good habit to be in. And 20 is kind of a nice number for a sample. It's not too big, but it's enough that you get some good practice in. So the first thing to note is my carriage is over here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to do my cast on going left to right. If my carriage were on the right-hand side, I would start right to left. And it is a good idea to practice both ways. You never know when you'll have to use one or the other. But start with what you're most comfortable with. So I want to make sure, I'm going to be using the tail of my yarn to do the cast on. So I want to make sure I have a lot of yarn. So what I do is I measure my yarn off generously 3 times the length that my needles are taking up. Now, I start with my yarn here. It's on the outside of my outmost left-hand needle. And I bring my yarn down beside the needle, across the bottom, up in between it and the next one, and around. So you can imagine what I'm really literally doing is I'm making cursive E's all the way around my needles. That's why we call it E-wrap. So I go underneath the next needle, up in between it and the one beside it, over top, and then down in between. While I'm doing this, I'm being really careful not to pull this really tight. That's going to make it very hard for the machine to go across. So I just keep it nice and loose and soft. And then I use this finger to push my stitches back here, close to the machine. So underneath the next needle, up in between, over and around, down in between, and then I slide it back. So underneath, in between, over, down, and slide it back. I've done this a million times, so I can do it like fairly fast and fluid. Don't worry if it feels awkward for you, that's okay. It'll get better the more times you do something. One thing to be really careful about is you don't want to leave your E-wraps up here. If that happens, when the carriage comes across, these stitches are going to get caught up here in the sinker plate, and it's going to get stuck and it's going to be awful. So just make sure that you push them back here like this. There we go. Now I'm going to get a little clip to hang on my yarn here, otherwise it's going to bob up like this. Again, I want to make sure these are fairly nice and loose and soft. If they're too tight, my carriage will jam when it's coming across, and it will either feel like I can't make the stitches, or you really absolutely won't be able to make the stitches and you'll have to take them all off and start again. So it's always better to start what feels like too loose, and then as you get more and more comfortable, you can snug it up and make it a little bit cleaner, but always start looser. Yeah, so now I'm going to take my yarn, just move this back here. So now I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to bring it, make sure it doesn't get caught behind any of these skate pegs. So I'm going to bring it underneath the sinker plate, thread it into my machine here. Double check my yarn mast, make sure it's all threaded properly, and that nothing has slipped out of anywhere. Okay. And now I'm going to knit across. I always have to check my edge stitches. They're usually a little bit funky. So I just want to sort them out before I go any further. I'll have a video on those edge stitches. Now, the trick with casting on is that with your knitting machine, it's the weights holding the cloth down that holds the stitches really safely onto the needles. But when you're first casting on, you don't have enough cloth to hang the weights. So we're just going to help the stitches out to keep them safe. So I hold my thumb and use it to hold down my stitch, and then I push this needle all the way out into D position. And you can do that one stitch at a time. You have a lot of practice at it. And so every one of these needles, if I had a bed of 100 stitches in working position, I would be doing it to 100 needles. I push them all the way out. It's really difficult. Your stitches can't jump from here right off the needles, so this just helps them stay on. And I'm going to 2 hands on the machine, come across, get another row. So that is my first knit row, cast on row. And then I'm going to push my needles all the way out, holding them down with my finger here, holding the stitches down. And across, check my edge stitches are better. And the same thing one more time. So pushing these all the way out, knit across. And you really only have to do that for the first 3 rows, unless you're knitting something that is really fine cloth, and there's just not enough cloth here to hang the weights, in which case you would do 4 or 5 or 6. So I'm going to take my claw weights, I'm going to hang them on the edges now. And I'm good to go. I can just knit. Always checking my side stitches, making sure they're okay. And I like to say to my students, when you're actually knitting across the bed, imagine yourself crossing a cold stream in the spring, and there's kind of 2 ways that we tend to do it. One way is to just rush from one side to the other to get it done as fast as you can, and then the other way is to very carefully, slowly pick your way across some rocks in the stream. And so when you're machine knitting, you're not running from side to side, you're just very slowly, deliberately picking your way across that stream. And then that's it. Move your claw weights up as the cloth builds up and they fall down. I like to keep them within an inch or 2 of the bed here. And then that's it. You just knit. So, good luck.